What if I showed you that the journey from I am the business to the business runs itself isn't just possible, it's actually predictable. Stage 1 is you're the hero, but you're also exhausted. Stage 2 is you've begun to delegate to a team, but you still lack consistency. At stage 3, you have your processes documented and you can grow predictably, but that growth is still linear. Stage 4 is you're now using AI to augment your talent. And at stage 5, AI is automatically running certain aspects of your business. And today, with two of the smartest business transformation experts that I know, we're going to show you how to navigate this journey. Here's the best part. We've created a diagnostic tool that will tell you exactly where you are in less than 5 minutes. But first, we'll show you what each stage really looks like, starting with the one that traps probably 80% of business owners. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So we're now gonna build on our previous discussion where we talked about AI readiness, like are you ready or not, how ready are you, and kind of zoom in and get more specific. Let's go right ahead and start with stage 1. What does it mean and what does it look like to have a heroic effort business?
The stats suggest that 80, maybe 90% of founders and business owners get stuck in what you might call a heroic or founder-led organization. Heroic is a good term for it. But what that looks like is that you're making most of the decisions, maybe all of them, or all major decisions are going to run through you. And that requires a lot of time. You may have a great vision for growth and expansion, for impact, for potential. And it becomes increasingly difficult, even as your organization starts to grow and as people start to join you. As you add people, it gets more complicated and more challenging. So understanding that stage 1 is entirely dependent on the bottleneck, is the first step in understanding this evolution journey.
There are a million cliches. Wearing all the hats, juggling everything at once, and trying to keep your eye on the ball, not letting anything fall. Working in the business, never on the business, because you have to keep your eye on the ball. So I think those are all apt, right? And what I notice is that there's no plan. In a business like that, there's never a plan because no one has any time to actually think about a plan or where we're going because you're constantly making all the decisions in the business, managing every aspect of it, maybe being involved in sales, being involved in fulfillment, also being involved in hiring and finance. It's exhausting.
I have a fun story. So in organizations that I've worked with over the past several years, there's an exercise I like to do occasionally where I'll bring in, I actually have bill caps, simple, they're black, and they have white labels across the forehead for a number of common business functions. I think there's like 10 or 12 of them. And so even in an organization that has a team, I mean a leadership team in place, I'll ask the question, so who wears this particular hat in the organization? And then I'll give that hat to that person and they'll put it on and we'll do this and I'll keep going until all 10 or 12 hats have been distributed. You can see where this is going. I think at one point I had a team of maybe 8 people in the room and the CEO had on 8 of the 10 hats, making the point, this is problem.
So I have a couple notes here that I thought maybe you two could comment on. What do workloads look like? How many hours a week is a heroic effort business owner working?
Yeah, it's pretty common to be, 70, 80 plus hours a week, working weekends, working nights, first one in, last one out. Yeah.
So they're the hero, but the hero can never leave, can never take time off, can never take a vacation.
And do it long enough and it ends up becoming part of your identity and, your ego identifies with it and it becomes even harder to get out of.
It's like the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave.
Oh, is that what that's about?
As you think about the stages where you are in your organization, it's possible that your own identity and ego is wrapped up in that reality, and that can be difficult to let go of. So I think that's something that pre-stage 1 is this awareness that might be true, and if it's true, then what? It's very difficult to assess or diagnose and then begin to go on the journey in evolution without that awareness first. This thing is dependent on me.
So when we look at a heroic effort business, how much can a business like that grow? What's the ceiling to its growth?
There are a lot of different ceilings. There's thresholds. I think these are kind of well known in the business growth and transformation marketplace. There's like the first $1 million of revenue or 10 employees is a ceiling, and then there's a number of them that can be identified. Often it's less about revenue and more about the number of people. It's the full-time equivalency. It's the head count of the organization, and it's in part due to the increasing complexity of the communication systems that are required to function. So just imagine, if you're a two-person organization, there's one channel of communication between you. If there's a third person, there's a channel between each of you and through each of you. And so there's at least 6 channels of communication. So you went from 1 to 6, and now add a fourth person, and you can see where this goes. This isn't an original concept, right? This is well documented how the increasing complexity of communication causes a lot of these breakpoints to exist. So from this heroic founder-led, this owner-led, or I am the business phenomenon, it starts to get challenging at about the third or maybe the fourth teammate. And depending on your ability to power through that, like maybe you can continue to power for a good while. You might have the fortitude to grow significantly. So I'm not going to say that no stage 1 businesses ever grow. In fact, in my experience, some do. It's just really, really hard.
It relies on the talent of those founders. One interesting thing about these businesses is the more people you have, the more work it is for you, because you typically are the decision-making bottleneck. And so every single new person who comes in represents a series of more decisions you need to make every single day. And you'll often see people complain about like, hey, when I had 4 people working for me, it seemed like we got more done and it was less work. Now I've got 9 people here, more than double the staff, and we're slower and it's more stressful. That's why.
Let's talk about AI. So for someone at this stage, how can they use AI? How can they use AI to ameliorate this situation?
100%. So the first thing you would need to do is actually create like clear job descriptions. And understand what all those hats are, right? And how many hats I'm wearing. And AI can do that for you. AI is just incredible at documenting, especially if you give it the context around your business through something like the master prompt. You can have AI write all of that out for you. And then you need to bring it out to the team, right?
We have another video that talks all about how to use AI to document job descriptions, which you can check out here.
So we're talking about, the stage 1 business and how AI can be useful at that. So, documenting things like role descriptions or job descriptions and starting to give clarity in what those hats are is one incredibly important and perhaps, first step in that direction. It can be daunting. So think about this without the use of an AI tool. If I said to you, Tiago, you need to document all of your jobs, all of the hats that you and your team happen to be wearing in this level of prescriptive detail, you might agree that should happen and then immediately never get that done because it's frankly a lot of work and there's all the other things that you do every day that need to continue to happen. So it's like, yes, it must happen. Doesn't happen. It can be challenging. An organization that has some people already, small and mid-sized organization might have some resource to help with that. Maybe you can go to your HR director, your people and culture director, and enlist them to help you. It's still hard because then you have to be involved in this feedback loop of saying, well, is this what you actually want that to say? No, that's not at all what I had in mind. I had something completely else in mind. And so that can create challenges in that as well. So without AI, it's still important. You still have to do the work. With AI, though, you can begin to streamline and accelerate the process by engaging in, say, a conversation with your LLM based on the context that you've given it, and you can ask it to help you. I think that's something that's really important at the stage 1 level is to engage. Ask the AI, what should a job description for this kind of a role, for this kind of a company in my situation look like? Will it get it all? Will it be perfect? No. But it'll be an 80% product that you can at least start with and then make refinements to, where if you don't have a HR leader to ask to do that for you, you're starting from zero. And if you do have that HR leader, they may only come up with an 80% product, and it's going to take them 3 days to turn that around. And oh, by the way, they have other things to think about as well. So the time delay in getting even to a minimum viable or an 80% product takes so long without it. Now we can use AI to get to that first stage so that we can move into a point of refinement easily.
What about if I'm trying to imagine, a small business owner doing this, and you write these job descriptions with AI's help, you start there, and you just realize that it's unclear, you don't even know what jobs each person is doing, or one of the job descriptions has so many things you're almost embarrassed to show it to that person and admit how much they have on their plate. What is the next step or another thing that you could ask AI's help on?
A couple of things come to mind. I'd love to hear what you think about that, Hayden. But for one thing you can do is you can ask the AI to help simplify what it just created. So for example, if you end up with a job description that has way too much on it, or at maybe a level of detail that's hard to put your head around, you can ask the AI tool to help simplify it and give me the top 3 or the top 5 things that absolutely need to be included. And also, how might I measure those things in ways that are meaningful in our particular context. So again, these are questions that you need to answer with or without AI. AI can simply help do that, do some of the thinking, some of that heavy lifting for you, and move you forward to a place where you can say, that's it, or that's not quite it, but it's close, and I can tweak it myself and make it real. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And so Dale's been like a management consultant for the last decade. And frankly, like that role is in jeopardy with AI, right? Because AI has all of that same skill set. So you would just need to treat your LLM as that management consultant. And so outside of just a job description, when we get into the next stages, you're actually trying to build a leadership team within the business, right? And so you can ask your LLM, what are the functions of a leadership team within my business? And again, if the LLM has the context of your business, it knows who the people are, knows what you do, right? Knows who your customers are. It can give you advice probably just as well as a very high paid consultant, right? That's the beautiful democratization. That is,
It's
AI.
painful to hear you say that, but it's true.
Yeah. Oh, there's lots of YouTube videos about like what's next for consultants. Because it's one of those areas that it really excels at.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, I've spent the last probably better part of a decade buying heroic effort businesses and then setting up a leadership team. And exactly what Dale was talking about. So we would buy a business and we would put someone as a people and culture person. Their job in the first usually 3 to 6 months was actually building out job descriptions across the organization. And what you mentioned about the feedback loop is 100% true, right? So they would spend their full time doing this, as well as some recruiting and culture stuff. And it would take so long. They'd have to have a meeting with this person to try to figure out that role, and then come back and then go to the GM, right, the general manager of the business, and be like, no, I don't think that's right. And it would be usually a 6-month process for that person to just get clarity in all these roles. And they were more than job descriptions. They had, outcomes and responsibilities and everything. Now, over the last year, we've just used the master prompt and AI to do all of that, and it is now done in a week. And the real thing there is you remove the feedback loop, right? You remove needing to talk to this person and then this person and this person, but they're busy and this person's out for a week. You totally remove that feedback loop. Yes, the documentation side of it is like instantaneous, but it's actually the feedback loop that is the biggest time saver.
So you're sort of using, at this stage at least, you're using AI as a sort of consultant, as a coach, as a sounding board, as a documentarian and a archivist as well. But it's sort of a mix of like analysis, advice, breaking things down and documenting them in external formats, which humans are not so good at doing, most of us naturally.
Some of us like that, but not all of us. Very few of us love that.
Probably few business owners, especially the visionary kind of.
Maybe none.
Yeah, so if you're in this first stage, if you're the hero, but you want the business to start growing without you, you need to start working with AI, work with the master prompt, give it context in your business, and have it start building out clear roles and an understanding of what a leadership team looks like.
I'm noticing we're putting so much emphasis on roles, job descriptions. So is that really the first, like, until you have job descriptions for everyone?
I mean, look at what we're doing right now. Like, I mean, what we'll spend this afternoon looking at is the job descriptions that people set up, because who's accountable for what, to be able to say, hey, you have full authority on making decisions for this up to $10,000. After $10,000, let's talk. Or after $50,000, let's talk.
It's two things. There's people and there's process. And we're going to get into how those things fit together through the next couple of stages. Stage one is identifying that the roles exist. Even if I'm an enterprise of one person, those roles still exist. I just happen to be wearing all of those hats.
Yep.
It's an organization with two people, same number of roles, but now it's split between two people. Okay, 200 people. Sure, there might be a leadership team and a management layer beginning to form up, and but same roles. So again, wherever you are in terms of number of people, you still have to be really clear on what those roles and functions are that are owned by actual people. And then each of those roles are going to ultimately be stewards of a set of processes. And if we don't have clarity around either of those things, we're stuck in heroism forever.
So probably one other thing to add, which is I would say two things. As a next step, a good book to read to identify if you feel like you're in stage one, you want to get out, would be the E-Myth. Like, that is the stage one book. And then the other thing is, we didn't talk at all about an org chart, but actually it's a very good experiment to actually just say, once you've separated this into roles, like, put it in a very basic org chart and put your name is probably going to exist 3 or 4 or 5 times, right? And that's okay. And maybe step one is, if it exists 4 times, get it to exist 3 times, right? And step 2 is get it to exist 2 times. And then once you got it to exist 1 time, you are now in stage 2.
Yeah, a question that I would ask, a client or a leadership team that I might be working with, or specifically for the founder or the CEO who's wearing too many hats, is just very simply, which of these roles are you going to fire yourself from first? All right, and on what time period is that going to happen? What's next?
And what is I'm curious, I recognize myself in a lot of what you're saying, not so much now, but pretty recently, just a few years ago. What is usually the breaking point, or is it a breaking point? What is the thing that makes that business owner kind of think, oh, I need to change, I need to do things differently?
It's often a point of trauma. Something happens. Something, it could be a health challenge. It could be a disaster. It could be a marriage that fails. It could be a mental health condition that emerges. Like, there's all kinds of break points that can emerge that cause a founder, especially, or an owner, to say, enough. This is not okay.
So I buy businesses for a living, and you encounter that, exactly those things. It's usually health. It's often relationships. I never see my kids, or my wife says, if I don't sell the business, we're done. So it's usually the rest of your life starts falling apart. Sometimes it's also just, you're just so burnt out, right? And it's like, it's that one managing of personalities, that put you over the edge. But yeah, it feels overwhelming. It feels like burnout. It feels like there's no end in sight, no light at the end of the tunnel.
Let's talk about stage 2. We're calling this the delegated decision business. Let's start right there. What is a delegated decision? Why is delegation so prominent in this stage?
So we talked about, at the end of stage 1, determining what roles exist, right? And how many times do you exist in your own organizational chart? Once you have identified other people and put them into those hats and those roles, and you really just exist with one role, you're also delegating decision-making in each of those roles to those people, so that you are no longer the central bottleneck. And some decisions are on what to do, right? And so there are various formats that, again, if you ask your LLM on how to manage rocks or OKRs, or different formats on how to figure out, like, what to do and what to work on. And some are other, like, should I spend money and what to spend money on? And part of delegation is to be able to say to, hey, Tiago, you manage marketing and you manage bringing leads in and bringing sales in. You have a budget of $20,000 a month. Spend it as you see fit. If you need to spend more than $20,000, let's talk. That is going to eliminate, if I'm the CEO of the business or the owner, that's going to eliminate 95% of the conversations we would have had to had.
What keeps someone from saying, Tiago, you've got this authorship of this function and stewardship of these decisions and this budget associated, go forth. What keeps that from working?
So I think the honest answer and what keeps that is probably like ego attachment.
That's one thing.
Yeah. Trust sometimes. But more than anything, I see it as just a need to micromanage.
There's another component to this, which I think is important. So if we've done our jobs in defining roles and responsibilities and providing clarity, which is one of the missions, I guess, of a good leader of an organization, is to give clarity. If we've done that well, we've also created a schematic for what success looks like in that particular role, including the things we've just been talking about. And we've ensured through our talent acquisition system that the person, Tiago in this example, has the competencies needed in order to fulfill. So it's one thing to have clarity on the role and the responsibilities and et cetera. It's another thing to make sure that the person filling that role is the right person, that they actually can be trusted because they have the right set of competencies. So that in my experience, that can also be a major hurdle that has to be crossed, because maybe we have an existing team in place and we've done the work of providing clarity, and we've handed off, hats now that are associated with real clear detail, only to discover that the people now wearing those hats are the wrong people. They actually don't have the right skills or the right competencies, or maybe they had them at one point, but as the organization has begun to grow and evolve, they are no longer the right who. So that's something to also be aware of in this defining moment and defining what the roles and starting to delegate effectively, is it may bring us to a point of making some decisions, since the delegated decision is kind of the label for stage 2. It brings us to a point of some people decisions that may be hard decisions that need to be made.
Interesting. So it's almost like the need to delegate or the desire to delegate almost forces a reckoning potentially, and makes you really think about, is this really the person that I want to delegate this to? Because if not, if you don't trust them, if it's clear they don't have the capacity, the skills, then you probably need to change that role.
There's a good acronym from Traction, which is GWC. It just gets it, wants it, and is capable of it.
Has the capacity for it.
The capacity for it, yeah. I really like that. Super easy to remember.
Interesting.
Right? Do they actually understand what they need to do? Do they actually want this role and everything that it encompasses? And do they have the capacity and the capability to actually do it?
Interesting. Let's talk about more. Another note I have here is going from owner-operated to having a leadership team. I want to know more about this because that's kind of an intimidating term, leadership team. Why is it important, even for businesses that are quite small? And what does a leadership team even look like for a 2-person business, a 4-person business, a 10-person business?
So for a 2-person or a 4-person business, there's no leadership team. That's very small. But even starting at a 10-person business, it's likely useful to start having one. It does depend on the size of the business. I would say you typically want someone on the leadership team to understand and handle the entire financial side of the business. Often it's the owner early on. You want someone who understands early on, you want someone who understands customer acquisition, right? How are you getting customers, right? And you want someone who understands fulfillment, right? So those are kind of 3 important functions. With finance, you could say a lot of other forms of administration as well, but I would start with finance, because if you run out of money, you're dead, right? And really 90% of business is just staying alive, right? So those are the 3 functions. If you're a small organization, I think the leadership team should have. And you'll have that person who's ahead of that function make decisions related to that function. And so those decisions are, what do I do with my time? And also, how do I spend money? right, as a company. As you grow more, you have more people enter the leadership team, and you have those functions end up becoming narrower, right? And I mean, we can talk later in the further stages what that might look like.
But I like you described this before, I think, as like almost that those different people on the leadership team represent different interests.
Yeah.
It's like one person represents the owner, another the internal team, another the customer. And so you have one person sort of advocating for each of those parties, right?
Yeah, again, that's probably when you get a little bit larger, you have sort of more of a balanced stakeholder approach. But even at this smaller size, where you have sort of finance does represent ownership, right? And typically customer acquisition represents the market and the brand, and fulfillment represents customer and quality. It's good to think of it that way. It's also good for everyone to think of like owning those processes, and we're going to get to that P word, which is really key. So if you're on the leadership team and you own customer acquisition, you also own the process for customer acquisition. How does it actually work today if I'm going to document that out? And how might it work better in the future?
Your question was, about leadership team formation and when is that necessary? And in a very small organization, maybe it is more of a theoretical exercise or construct than an actual. But I would also say it's a good thought exercise, even in an organization of two. I specifically remember the day that in my CPA firm founded in 2008, that my co-founder and I sat down, having frustrated each other with a series of who's making this decision and a sequence of God-a-minute meetings in which we would, always barge in on the other person unannounced and say, hey, I want to talk about this thing. And it was just dysfunctional and frustrating. We just sat down and we did an exercise based on what we're describing here. We created a set of those functions that we're each wearing, hats that we were wearing, and we kind of built out our org chart in some degree of detail, recognizing that the two of us, before we had employee number 3, the two of us owned all of those hats, and in some cases, I reported to him, and in some cases he reported to me, and it's a little bit nerdy perhaps to go through an exercise like that, but it was cathartic for us. It became very useful because from that moment forward, we had an agreement between us that we could, stop by each other's office and ask a question on the condition that you had to announce which hat you were wearing and which hat you were addressing. And sometimes during the conversation, the hats would need to switch, and it's okay because that's the reality. But it became a really good formative exercise for as our team began to grow. And then years later, as I've worked with teams that have been, hundreds of people, the lesson, the principle is valid. The exercise in creating that clarity for yourself and for the team around you is absolutely required.
Everyone knows in a startup this concept of like how difficult it is to get product market fit, right? It can take years, right? And a lot of people talk about like that's the reason for startup failure, which is true. But there's another chasm that every business needs to cross that nobody talks about. Some people call it the valley of death. Other people call it the swamp. And it is specifically between stage 1 and stage 2. When you have too few people in the business to actually delegate to other people and form this leadership team. And what the two options are basically, I take all the profit that exists from my business and I risk it on a hire who can then become an extra, we call it like an extra cannon for the business, right? Or I can work ridiculous hours in order to get this, right? I also think like unit economics, actually understanding like raising your prices and becoming more profitable is probably the best way. But I just want to acknowledge that this stage exists. It's very difficult, and you probably need to do all three to get through it. You probably actually do need to lower what you're taking as a salary for yourself, risk hiring someone, work extra hours, and increase your prices and make sure that your unit economics are strong to get through that. And if you do that well, it can be done relatively quickly. It's not like product market fit where it takes years. It could be done in months.
Yeah, well, let's talk more about that actually. So specifically with AI, Does AI make that chasm easier or faster to cross? And if so, like how would you use AI to cross that chasm?
It does make it easier because if you leverage AI yourself, you will become more productive, right? It's you to the power of AI. And so you can get more done in less time and basically make more money. But you do then need to invest that money into hiring the team and then teaching that person to also use AI. So it does speed everything up that way. And then also using AI as a coach and even identifying where you are, like using this language, hey, I'm in the swamp right now, right? I'm trying to get to a becoming leadership run, but it's just me right now, or it's just me and two other people. How do I do this? AI is a great coach to kind of coach you through that, both on what to do and sort of psychologically helping you through that.
Can almost become one of the initial people on your leadership team. AI can, right?
Well, not only can it, like that's actually a great way to use it. We can tell our AI to act as if you are and then you could fill in the blank. It could be a consultant or a coach or a management advisor, or it could be an actual functional delegate of your organization. Act as a marketing manager for this business of this type. The master prompt is referenced elsewhere and taught as part of this cohort, as part of the curriculum here. But without that, even without a master prompt providing appropriate level of context, an LLM can help you with that from scratch. May not be as good. It can certainly be better. But it can get you off of dead center to help you think through where you're at and what are some of those next steps that you need to take.
And what kind of, I always notice with LLMs is they're so powerful, but they're also always waiting on you to make the first move to initiate the conversation. So let's say you're at the stage and you're thinking, I'd like to start building a leadership team. Let me try using AI as like the first member of that leadership team. What are the questions you'd ask or the prompts you'd use?
So it depends on, I would look at the function, right? So I would say, hey, you are my fractional CMO. You are an expert in the industry. You'll know my business extremely well. Here is where the master prompt, I believe, makes it probably 10x more effective. And I would just say, I would ask the same questions what you might ask on an offsite in a leadership. What should we be working on? That's a question I ask AI all the time. I have a lot of different businesses, a lot of confusions, like what should I be working on? And I always ask, so my favorite prompts are ask me questions one at a time to determine the answer, and answer your own question based on what you already know about me and my business, and wait for me to edit or approve before continuing. And so what that does is it asks me these questions 90% of the time, maybe 95% of the time, its answer is correct. And I just say, yep. And you get to kind of be walked through step by step what to do and why, very, very quickly without having to really type.
Let's work with that and talk about a variation of that. So this is true if you're a startup with one person or maybe two persons in your organization. But you mentioned asking the kind of questions that you might ask in a leadership offsite. So let's imagine that you're an organization that's already experienced some growth or have existed for a period of time, and maybe there is a leadership team, and maybe you have engaged in a practice of periodic planning and offsites, and some of this work has already begun pre-AI. That's also possible. Everything you just said, Hayden, applies in the physical offsite environment. In preparation for that offsite, you can set and do the exact same set of prompts you just described. You can actually work with those questions in advance so that when you show up with your physical team in a physical location to have actual conversation together, you've already done some, what I would say is way better than average pre-work. Preparation, bringing you, we had a conversation yesterday about some strategic planning stuff, and you had used the LLM in advance to seed some of your own thinking so that by the time we all had a conversation, you were quite a bit ahead of where you would have been had we started from dead zero in that conversation. So even if you're already in the mid-market squarely with a leadership team in place, but facing some of the challenges we're describing as being a stage 1 or a stage 2 organization, these things can help.
Interesting. It almost becomes like your leadership team facilitator. It's prompting you and preparing you. Even if your leadership team is all humans, you can use the AI to just advance your thinking, it sounds like, and arrive more prepared.
My experience in physical offsites with leadership teams, which I've done dozens of times in the past decade, is that the quality of the outputs is directly correlated with the amount of preparation that takes place. So as a consultant or a coach, I make some contributions to that by providing, pre-quiz, pre-work questionnaires, things like that, that people can begin to interact with. Maybe they answer a survey or complete a survey, the results of which are forwarded in advance so people can at least see where each other is. That's important. But just think about that to the power of, I don't even know what the exponent is, but it's massively better to think of, like, instead of asking you a set of, half a dozen questions as pre-work, we're going to set that up as part of an LLM, and we're going to engage in a conversation around 6 topics, the outputs of which are going to be, 2, 3, 4 layers deeper. By the time we actually show up together, we're going to already have sussed out what's really, really important for us to talk about, dealt with the stuff that was tactical or easy to deal with already. And so the value and the quality of the time invested begins to be significantly enhanced. So this applies at brand new baby startups, small organizations, all the way through the mid-market and larger organizations as well.
So it applies to trillion-dollar companies, right?
It absolutely
Amazon
does.
has this practice, right? In all their meetings, someone has to prepare, and they often spend weeks preparing this document that everyone...
The 6-page memo.
The 6-page memo that everyone has to read and review prior. And it's all about exactly what you're saying. It's clarity of thought, right? And so they spend weeks, or someone will spend 2 weeks preparing this memo that has very clear thought, because it makes the meeting that much more effective. AI can just do this for you now, right? That's what AI was really great at, is this clarity of thought. And so creating that practice of, before a meeting, let's have this clear memo set up is something that can now be done probably close to that level of quality in minutes, which is incredible. Again, the democratization of execution, right?
We mere mortals can too also.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk about, let's say we've moved to stage 2. We've written out all our job descriptions. They're all accurate. Maybe we've changed some personnel decisions. We have a leadership team. The leadership is meeting. I hear a lot of costs there, time commitments, maybe even money that's being spent, opportunity cost. What are the benefits? What have I gained? What do I now have? What can I now do? How is maybe my workload and my lifestyle better or different because we've moved to stage 2?
So there's personal benefits for you, the owner, and there are benefits for the organization, right? So for you, the owner, well, now you can take that month-long vacation we were talking about, right? Which is great. Also, typically, you, the owner, are now working on very different things and things that are, I would say, more leveraged. And you're probably working a lot with AI, by the way, right? You're thinking about where's the organization going, right? You're making key hires. You're making, important, large capital decisions, right? You're not managing this, managing people on a very local level, right? You're not listening to what this person said about that person, right? So from that perspective, it's a lot more fun. Like a lot more fun. Again, depending on what you like. From the perspective of the organization, you can now just grow a lot more, right? So there's your ceiling in that sort of stage 1 business was probably, let's call it 10 people most of the time, right? And even at that 10 people, like I said, like between 9 and 10, it's actually probably more complex, right? And it's probably slower. But for one of these stage 2 businesses, it's more like Dunbar's law. It's more like your ceiling is like 150 people, right? Because you now have people who can manage supervisors who can manage front facing, right? And so you end up having more of a traditional org chart. So the business can now grow into the tens of millions in profit.
You you asked kind of what the benefit was of moving from stage 1 to stage 2, and there's it was kind of cliche, but the idea of working on the business versus in the business, and we talk about that, and we advocate that to grow an organization, the owner or the leadership team needs to ultimately be freed up in how they get to spend their time. They need to be able to choose the way they spend their time so that they can begin to work on the business instead of in the business. My experience is sometimes it's difficult to even imagine what that looks like. And it's difficult to, start to offload the in the business things to provide the available energy capacity to work on the business. First step is you've got to get something off of the plate so you can free up some capacity. It's not that you will immediately start working less in your business. That's probably not true. You might actually work more, but you're working on different things, and the value of the time begins to accrue much more quickly.
We were talking about this yesterday. My core purpose in business is to help people get freedom, right? Through becoming entrepreneurs. And the reality is you don't get any of that freedom until you get to stage 2. And when I think freedom, it's not so much financial freedom. Like, yes, you do get financial freedom. That typically requires some level of liquidity, and there might be better ways to do that, right? It's more about freedom. It's autonomy in what you do and when you do it, right? So like the best part of being an entrepreneur is being able to rewrite your job description whenever you want, being able to work whenever you want, on what you want. But you can't do that at stage 1. Stage 1, you're reactive, right? You're not actually in control. You're actually working this 80 hours for other people. You just don't really realize it. Once you're in this stage 2, if you wake up one day and you're like, you know what, I want to really work on this thing because it interests me and it aligns with the company's purpose, and maybe it's not like the best thing to make it $1 billion company, but I want to do that. You can do it.
You're gaining autonomy, choice, agency, those kinds of words. Let's move on to stage 3, because this is where things get very exciting. We've sort of been building up to this as a culmination. We've called it the process-driven machine. How would you two define this and think about what it means to be a stage 3 business?
So in stage 2, we have a leadership team. We have different functions of the organization. We have an org chart, but you still are relying on talent. And when you rely on talent, you kind of rely on luck a little bit. And I mentioned you can get to 150 people, but most businesses don't because they can't consistently find talent to create a quality outcome, right, for their customers. So you do that by implementing process, right? And typically the leadership team would develop the process and the process associated with their functions. And more than that, and that development of that process and the documentation of the process is usually part of stage 2. More than that, you actually need to create an actual technology system to be able to kind of track and enforce and audit that process. And it ends up becoming a big training vehicle as well for the company. And so that's really the difference between stage 2 and stage 3. In stage 2, you're still relying on hiring really talented people. And in stage 3, your systems themselves can turn, they always say B players can turn your B players into, or your C players into B players, right? And that's enough to keep the business growing.
What are the other pieces that makes it that makes it process driven, that makes process the heart of such a business?
So if you have let's say you have a customer onboarding process, right? And let's say, so I'll give you the stage 2 example of it, right? The stage 2 example is you've got the process sort of outlined, right? And technically every process, this customer onboarding has an instance, right? Or a workflow associated with it. So, John comes on as a customer and he goes through these steps in this order. So in a stage 2 business, you know that John comes in and goes through these steps, but you don't actually know necessarily how long each step takes, who does each step, and if a step got missed. And if it got missed, why or how or when. And so you end up becoming reactive. And now John the lagging indicator is like now John's an upset customer, right? Or a churning customer. And you kind of go back to like, well, where did that happen? And you need to have meetings and things to figure it out. And it's a waste of time, right? In the stage 3 business, with technology, John went through step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. Each step had a deadline associated with it. Each step had a person associated with it, had someone check it off, right? And that between step 5 and step 6, somebody dropped the ball. You know who dropped the ball, right? You can audit it at any time, and you can say, hey, you dropped the ball here. And and ideally, you don't have to wait for John to churn, right? Ideally, someone drops the ball, it flags something for the supervisor of that person. It's addressed. John doesn't churn. So that does require systems in place. And I do think, I hold by what I said before, that like that is what allows you to hire more people and not rely on someone being incredibly talented, have an incredible working memory, right? Because that's actually a big part of it, is working memory, right? Do you remember every single step about this, right? And that's what allows you to take off and grow.
I remember in my CPA practice years ago, we bought a firm, and there were some retiring principals, and so we acquired their firm, and some of their team stayed on as a function of the transition. And one of the issues that existed in the previous practice was that they had a pretty large outstanding account receivable balance. There was not a lot of hygiene related to collecting for work performed. So we inherited this problem, and we solved the problem first by understanding what the process that what the old process looked like and what we wanted the new process to look like. And that took some time. Again, all pre-AI, very much manual, sticky notes on the wall, Lucid or Visio charts on the computer, and all that stuff. But we figured out what the process steps were. And then we were able to recognize that the order of the steps that were occurring were causing the issue. We weren't asking for the payment at the appropriate time in the process. In fact, we weren't asking for the engagement letter to be signed at the appropriate stage, which provided the basis for asking for the payment at the appropriate stage later. So these are just real basic fundamental things, right? The upshot is, as we moved from what we would call stage 1 to stage 2, we got people in the process documented. The stage 3 was then an understanding that what formerly took, in some cases, 3 weeks to complete. A process took 3 weeks to go from start A to point last. We could actually move through that entire process in 3 days, and we increased our ability to collect accounts receivable. We went from having 3 months of sales in receivables at one point to 2 weeks. So it was a massive lift. So I think maybe a word you could apply here is, if stage 1 is about heroics and stage 2 is about delegation and stage 3 is about becoming process driven, it's that the people and the processes coalesce around a set of known standards. So in this example, we went from having no standard to asking what the standard ought to be and doing real work to define it. Then we were able to measure that standard, measure against that standard through the use of a process consistently. And ultimately, I didn't have to pay attention to it anymore. It just happened. And the financial outcome was a significant enhancement in our cash flow.
Great example. So it's standards, technology enablement, the right people interacting with and operating those things. There's a number of different pieces here, it sounds like. Let's talk for a minute about the mindset. I have here from doer to designer. What does it mean for a business owner to transition from being a doer to being a designer?
So the transition from doer to designer is, I think, connected with working in your business to working on your business, and freeing up that capacity to truly understand not just, well, how do we do things around here, but how could they be done around here? How ought they to be done? And then to engage both the people and the process in designing a better way. That's really the fundamental thing. So, if you're stuck in stage 1, for example, you might agree that sounds good and have absolutely no idea how to do it.
that first transition from doer to designer happens between stage 1 and stage 2. It's what you're designing changes a little bit, and also what your training changes, right? So from stage 1 and stage 2, you are teaching people to be better leaders, be better managers. You're often, if it's like a newer team, you're often teaching people on like the role and what the role is. But between stage 2 and 3, it's almost more like it's a little bit more like you're a builder, or you need to have a building side to it, because there is a technology component to it. Similar example is like we had this one, so we were at that point in this business, a stage 2 business, right? We had a leadership team every week. We went over a scorecard, and week over week, one of the leaders was red on their scorecard, right? And we dug into it and decided, what we need to do is we'll dig a couple levels deep and say, we need to see this one metric. I'm going to give a new target. We need to see this. What percentage of these do you get done within 3 days, right? And in order to do that, there was a technology component. We were using Salesforce at the time. And basically through Salesforce, we tracked it all. And we got to the point where now we could measure 60% within 3 days, 80% within 3 days, and then 100% within 3 days. But you need to kind of build that technology level to be able to say, how are we actually measuring this metric each time, right? So there's a technology component. You need to train your leadership team on the technology in this way, which is a little different than something that's more like soft skills, right? And sometimes you would bring in an external consultant for this, or an external implementer, or use a different software tool. So I'd probably say it's like more like a builder, or there's a builder component to it.
It's not pure design. Let's talk about ceilings. What are some of the ceilings that you hit as a stage 3 business that might mean you need to think beyond stage 3?
The ceiling here is like you're now at stage 3. You're now in sort of like corporate territory, right? Where if again, Dunbar's law, you're probably limited to the size of your local market, right? And so you could expand and open in new territories. So there's not much of a ceiling in terms of how big could that company become in terms of headcount. The ceiling kind of exists in more like how profitable is that company per employee, and how productive are you? So the next level that we'll get to is then using AI to kind of be AI to the power of you, right? And exponentially make the company more valuable. But I wouldn't actually say that I think a lot of companies will hit hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of dollars in valuation while still being in this stage 3. Because really stage 4 is not really come out until the last couple of years.
Stage 3 is a pre-AI concept. You could reach stage 3 before AI, right? So how does AI change what it means to be stage 3 and how you get to stage 3?
The number one thing that you need to do in stage 3 is document all your processes. This is a process that I've done in my company is that took the better part of a year in every single company. AI can now do that in the better part of a week, right? The actual documentation. Let's not confuse documentation with a done job, right? After documentation, well, you need to store that somewhere. You still need that technology solution, right? Are you using like an ERP, a CRM? Are you doing your own thing? We actually used AI to custom code our own version and now save about $100,000 a year in our ERP for every one of our companies. Because AI as a coding solution is just ridiculous. So documentation, I would say, is number one. There is a level that if you're willing to do it, there is a level of actually using AI to code and solve this. And even if you're not, even the integration, so say you're using a HubSpot or a Salesforce, that integration can now be done with AI and do probably 80 to 90% of the work. So just make sure you're working with a developer who knows how to do that.
Previously, you'd have to custom code your own integration.
Yeah, or most of the time you would probably be bringing on someone who already knows that, the stack of whatever you're working on. And it was a long process. Usually the companies that actually offer the software have terrible actual support and system development. So you tend to work with third-party consultants. They can be expensive. They don't know your business. Luckily, with a master prompt, AI knows your business really well. It can create a PRD for your developer. 90% of your work's done.
I remember years ago, believing that we needed to implement Salesforce in my business at that time. And so I, as an enlightened business owner, recognized that I wasn't the expert in Salesforce. And so I went out in search of the right who to help me implement Salesforce. And I ended up speaking with a Salesforce implementation specialist in my area. And his first question was, well, tell me about your sales process. And I stuttered and said, I thought that by implementing Salesforce, that would be my sales process, right? I thought that's what I'm hiring you to do. He snorted and said, look, young man, you have to have a process first that you first identify and follow manually, and then I can help you implement Salesforce as a way to automate that process. I cannot help you if you do not have a process. And that was a really important moment for me, because I realized, to the point, that was a lesson. Like, process has to be documented and followed. You've kind of mentioned that in stage 3, there's this technology. A big chunk of this is a technology stack build out. And I like to think of technology as simply being the tools that we're using to affect a particular outcome. They don't necessarily have to be software technology tools or digital tools. Technology can be very low tech. I remember working with a client years ago who had a very low tech piece of technology that they used as part of their customer acquisition process. And it was very simply that they wrote down, for every inbound call they received, they wrote down on a yellow legal pad the caller's information along with a serialized number in sequence. So at a glance, they could simply flip through the yellow pad and know exactly from date A to date B how many calls they had received by subtracting the ending sequence number from the beginning. Like, this is super low tech, but that's technology. Now, that was a starting point. That wasn't the end point of the process. But just understanding that the use of your technology stack can be as simple as using a yellow legal pad. It's still a sequence and it's still a routine that has to be done. If you skip logging the call that came in or the lead that came in from the web form or whatever it is, if you skip that step, the process breaks down. The standard for success cannot be measured and it cannot be improved.
Well, I think it's more about like first brain versus second brain here, right? It's like you have organizational knowledge management that are determining the things that need to be done, as opposed to I need to figure out every single day based on my memory,
based on my brain.
Yeah, based on my first brain, what needs to be done, and your first brain is flawed. Like, it will be flawed, or you'll not be motivated one day, right? And so that's the difference, is that you have this centralized organizational knowledge management that determines what needs to be done on a day-to-day basis.
Let's talk about stage 4. We've called it the AI-Augmented Powerhouse. Let's talk about what that means. What does it mean to be an AI-augmented company today?
It means that you and your people are using AI on a daily basis. And probably AI has actually been put into your processes. So AI augmented in the sense that it's you to the power of AI. You are still a human in the loop, right? But there are certain things that AI does extremely well and can do at major scale. And so the first real step in becoming a stage 4 is identifying what those things are and updating your standards based on what AI can actually do, right?
Say more about why is it necessary to update your standards, and what does that look like?
In a basic example, AI is really good at like 4 different things, right? So number 1, it's documentation, which is the creation of all sorts of different types of media, right? Obviously, it does that thousands of times faster than we can. It's good at research, right? It can go out and research things thousands of times faster than we can. It's good at personalization, right? Which is really research plus documentation combined, right? But it's warrants its own category. And it's good at prediction, right? Which again is other things combined. So anything that involves any of those 4 things, AI can do much, much, much faster than you or I can without AI. And so because of that, if something involves those things, your standards up until now may have been to do 10 units of economic activity per day. But with AI, your standard may be 1,000 per day. but maybe it doesn't make sense to do 1,000, right? Maybe that has massive diminishing returns. So we're still only going to do 10. But instead of it taking all day for Dale, we set the standard that, hey, Dale, this should take 30 minutes. And now we're going to rewrite your role, Dale, into allowing you to do other things, not just, and that's how sort of you get that transformation, that productivity from the individual going up to the organization, is you need to set new standards. Now, at the same time, if you're setting new standards and you're setting higher expectations for Dale, I personally believe there should be something really in it for Dale, whether that's, economic, Dale gets more money, whether that's, lifestyle, Dale gets to work 4 days a week.
For the same money.
For the same money, right? I personally believe like that's what needs to happen in this sort of AI revolution.
Otherwise, you're just raising the standards and making people learn and change and put in effort, but there's just nothing in it for them. There's no incentive. There's no benefit to them.
Exactly. And eventually Dale will resent me for doing that. And eventually Dale will leave and take his skills elsewhere. And the cost of that churn will be very high. So I think it makes good business sense as well as being the right thing to do.
Yeah. I want to kind of expand on a point here I have. AI handles routine and humans handle the exceptional. What does it mean for humans to handle the exceptional?
Exception handling is what it's usually called in process, right? So there is a routine that happens, and your process documents that. It also documents what the exceptions might be and how humans handle it. So it's literally got a name called exception handling.
Well, think about a business like large scale construction, general contracting, or something like that. I know you have a lot of experience in the home services sector. So, bidding and estimating for an HVAC, even a residential HVAC project, is a relatively complicated thing, right? Relatively. Or building a high rise is going to include lots more things. So the process manual, pre-AI augmentation, the process is that we've got to do a series of things, takeoffs, calculations, generate some reports, maybe take pictures. All of these things have to take place in a rather large body of work to assemble, a price, an estimate, and then move into some kind of contracting and fulfillment stage. Make sense? So with AI augmentation, though, the pieces of that are routine can be accelerated. We can use a tool, variety of tools, but a tool can help us move through the things that previously took us perhaps weeks, can be compressed into minutes or hours. Are there any exceptions that come up in construction management? Always. There's always something. We recently had a new HVAC system installed in our home, and we had a couple of particular problems. The comfort specialist was able to give us a quotation fairly simply using the technology at his disposal. The reality was when the installers came out, the exception was they were going to have to figure out a way of rerouting some of the ductwork through a particular chase system that was fairly technical. There's no way that any of the technology currently in play could have anticipated and or figured that out. The technology took care of all of the routine stuff. He was able to give a quote and engage me in mere moments. The technician still had to make some final decisions about how we were going to route this thing, and are we going to use flex tube or hard pipe. That's an example of exceptions.
So exceptions are unexpected deviations, aberrations, what's abnormal, what's not able to be predicted. It's some thing that happens that, at least like you say, current technology, maybe one day it will be able to, but the technology doesn't know is going to happen. That's where humans concentrate.
It's something that's outside of your process's documentation, basically. And sometimes in your process, you actually list what those exceptions may be, because they're so rare that it's not even really worth, automating and entering in and adding that level of complexity. In the HVAC example, you may have a process that's on this, and you may have within the process saying that there's some exception handling around working with chillers or boilers, right? Because you don't do that, right, in your company. or you might subcontract that.
Let's talk some practical examples. I have a few here, 3 that I'll list, and you can choose which one you want to speak to. Examples of what it means for humans to focus on exception handling. AI generates all first drafts of content, automated real-time reporting, decision support systems. Any concrete examples of any of those come to mind?
So I've done all 3 of those. I wouldn't say that that's exception handling so much as like human in the loop. Often, if you're writing content and you want to send it out, you do want a human in the loop just to review something, right? And so that's an example of this stage and not the AI executing on its own, which you may get to, right? Now, that human in the loop is actually, that's the most time-consuming part of this process, right? Again, AI could write 100,000 things. How long does it take you to review 100,000 things? The next example is something that I've enjoyed, building out my own sort of solution for, which is automated reporting. I hate reporting. I absolutely hate how much time reporting takes everybody and how much everybody involved hates it, right? And so that did require like a custom solution that also ended up saving us money because we don't need seats in our CRM anymore. But there still is a level of making sure it's right, right? And so that's actually more than a human in the loop and reviewing each time. It's more like just auditing it occasionally. What was the third example?
Decision support systems.
So that's usually, for me, decision support systems are usually working directly with your LLM with context, right? And the thing that Dale brought up earlier, right? So how do I have clarity before each of my meetings and use AI to provide clarity for each of those meetings? Or even at the end of the meeting, how do I use AI to determine next steps? Like that's something, again, I hate driving accountability. I hate being the person at the end of a meeting to be like, so Tiago, you're going to do X, Y, and Z by this date, right? And saying, so Dale, you're going to do this. And then saying, having it on my calendar to check, did Tiago do X, Y, and Z by this date? I can't stand that, right? Yeah. But AI can do that. AI can do all of that automatically. And so that is a decision support system, right? It helps with accountability.
Any other examples of, I guess the examples are like, what do the systems inside a stage 4 business look like? How do they function?
So to kind of tee off that example, like, we all have our digital note takers or our AI enabled note takers that show up in our Zoom rooms at this point, right? So there's the bubbles and there's the, what's the other, the otter, fathoms and otters and bubbles. And it's quite the
menagerie.
Quite the menagerie. And they all work similarly.
Yeah.
And I have yet to choose one that I prefer myself. Rather, especially working with teams of people like you all, for example, I am bombarded with, the meeting follow-ups from at least 6 different things, typically from every single short call we happen to be on. I'll get an otter summary from 2 people and a fathom summary from someone and a bubble summary from someone else. Yeah. And so, well, that isn't sustainable, and I'll at some point put an end to that. For now, it's actually great to observe the different outputs from these different sorts of systems and tools, and then to experiment with what's a great workflow. So back to what are the standards, what are the routines, what are the things that I as a human still need to do. Maybe there can be some automation take place here, but it's not there yet. We're definitely not stage 5. We're probably moving in the stage 3 and not yet quite stage 4 in that one instance. Now, what to do with those tasks? So to give the very concrete example, it's important at the end of that meeting for us all to agree on who's going to do what by when. So the principle is that there needs to be accountability, and I think you may hate driving it, but you also appreciate it, right?
Of course.
Absolutely. So now we have a choice. We're going to take Otter's word for it and use that. Are we going to use the Otter and the bubbles and the Fathom versions and then manually move that into some kind of task management system? Are we going to use one of those tools to automatically feed our system or tool of choice to be able to drive something that I can ultimately check off, and we can show that Dale actually did what he said he would do at 8 a.m. on Thursday, or what? So these are the kinds of decision. What was the? I forget the
Decision
label.
support systems.
The decision support systems. This is just. Again, this is not sexy, but it's very practically relevant to where we are.
So practically, how would you go do that? And I'll give you different examples. And actually, this is probably a good time to say that even starting at around stage 3, you will have different functions of your business or different processes in your business evolve to different stages, right?
At different times.
At different times. Yeah. So you may have your market to lead process stage 2, whereas your lead to sales actually almost at stage 4, right? That is common, right? And the reality is, as you're implementing this, you're implementing them one at a time. So not everything will be, at the beginning, not everything will be stage 3 or stage 4, right? So an example in lead to sale, right? So sales management, traditionally, if you look at how a sales manager and a salesperson will work. A sales manager will have a certain number of meetings with each salesperson, right? So you might have a pipeline review meeting. You might have a call review meeting. You might do that fairly frequently. Within your process, maybe you do it more frequently if their sales are below a certain standard, right? You have one-on-ones. And then you have the salesperson has to do reporting. So after every single call, they have a 30-minute call. Now they spend 5 minutes recording everything in the CRM. They have to do certain tasks at the end. I got to set up my automation or my follow-up, right? If you don't use a CRM, you're probably just not doing these things, right? So that's how it works traditionally. And because of that, a sales manager maybe can manage a handful of salespeople, right? And there's still those salespeople are probably utilizing at least 2 hours of their day note-taking, right? So here's an example on how you can use AI in a stage 4 system to save a lot more time. So you have a connection that records all your calls. Right? Number one, let's assume this is a Zoom call or a Google Meet or whatever. That recording and the transcription of that recording is fed in to, let's say, your CRM.
Automatically.
Right? Automatically, right? And there's a series of prompts that happen by API, right? And the first prompt is to go over the transcript and note the action items, right? Go over the that's one, right? What are the action items? Go over the transcript and score the call internally based on X, Y, and Z. Did you ask for a sale, right? That's the hardest one. It's so difficult to, especially with new salespeople, you have to listen to their whole sales call to actually figure out, did they ask for the sale, right? Which is the number one thing in sales. It's like, just ask for the sale, right? Even the simplest thing is like, did the person show up, right? Because sometimes people are not recording that correctly, and that screws up all your reporting. But obviously, if the transcript is empty, or the call didn't happen, right? Or did they spend enough time listening, right? And so I personally don't give the score. I don't let the AI, deliver the score to the salesperson. Instead, it's recorded, and sales manager can see it, right? But because of all this, what we actually have is another step, which is an integration. We use Slack, so it's an integration into Slack. And our Slack bot messages the salesperson and says, basically, here's the call recording, here's the link if you want to use it, right? And here's the follow-up I'm sending, and it's personalized based on what you talked about. And here's the next 2 emails I'm going to send on this day and this day. Do you want to edit anything? Yeah, go for it, right? Boom, it updates, right? And actually, the salesperson no longer needs to use Salesforce. We actually don't need a seat in Salesforce for that salesperson anymore, right? Because we just need to have the automation seat, right? And the great thing about this is it's a wonderful experience for the salesperson. Everyone is now being tracked. All the reporting is being updated automatically, right? Again, what do we report? Like how many marketing qualified leads there were, how many sales qualified leads, the show rate, the offer rate, right? We're now sending follow-ups personalized automatically. There's a human in the loop, but all that human in the loop really has to do is say yes or change this. And it goes back and does that, right? And now the sales manager can probably manage 3 times more people if they want to, because they only need to check things that get flagged automatically by the system.
Are the salespeople making more money even because they're spending more of their time on revenue generating calls?
So not only are they able to take more calls, right? And our salespeople are usually variable, so they want to take more calls, right? But their conversion rates are higher because they aren't forgetting to follow up. Their follow-ups are more personalized. Their follow-ups are better. And if the sales manager chooses to use the capabilities on call review, well, now the sales manager is going to have a call review on a call that's already been screened privately to them on something that really you didn't ask for the offer, right? And so they're reviewing the right calls and going over the right thing with the salesperson. The salesperson can actually get better, right? Because otherwise you're doing call review. Sometimes you do call reviews and you're not selecting the right call, or you let the salesperson select the call and it's the call they did really well. It resulted in a sale, right? Or you do a call review and there's just like nothing learned from it. So there's all sorts of elements on like you're training better, you're getting more done, and you're doing it more effectively.
Wow, it really strikes me that it's almost like in stage 3, when we said system, we sort of meant mostly just like a static document, like a checklist or something like that. But now when we say system, now that we're in stage 4, you're talking about a whole partially automated, there's still some humans in the loop, but a whole technological solution, it's really a system when you say system.
Yeah, what I described before, what we were doing before is the classic stage 3 system of sales management, right? And this is at least my interpretation of one way to do a stage 4 system.
Maybe as one other example of how this works practically, you might go back to the HVAC system metaphor, at least. So we had a new HVAC system installed. All of our homes have some kind of heating and cooling systems. The studio we're in has a system that is engaged in making it comfortable where we are, right?
Yeah.
So this is not new. We've all had, every structure that we've occupied for decades has had some kind of heating and cooling system. What is that? Oh, well, there's compressors and blowers and ducts and fans and all the things that comprise the system. A thermostat that can be adjusted and in more recent times can be programmable. Now in stage 4, though, the thermostat we're using is smart, right? So it's now learning. It's learning about our patterns. It's figuring out when we're home, when we're not home. It's figuring out what the patterns of weather happen to look like, and it's starting to make adjustments on its own. It's very much an augmented and perhaps even automated in terms of what it's doing. What are the effects of that? Our experience is better because it's more comfortable at the right times without us having to walk over and manually heat up or cool down the thermostat.
We don't have to think about it.
I don't have to think about it. And it's causing my energy bill to go down. So we're saving money as a result. So those are just a couple of really simple examples of how your question was about the system. The system is just a collection of things. The augmentation is when we begin to use the AI or the learning opportunity within the system to make it better, to make it faster, to make it cheaper, to make the experience better, etc.
Great metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah, smart homes will be based on having intelligence. They'll have new inputs, right? Like it'll make sense for there to be cameras in here to understand, hey, we're filming right now and the air conditioner's loud, so make sure the air conditioner's never on when we're filming.
Yeah.
Right? And like Tiago could literally just write that one time and it'll remember, right?
Or make sure that it cools it down an extra 3 degrees 30 minutes before our next scheduled session, because when the lights are on, it gets hot in here. That's that sort of thing is the practical application.
So there's one more thing I want to ask about stage 4 before we move on to stage 5, which is the role of humans. So we've talked a little bit about how they might still be in the loop, but what kind of employees? What kind of people would you even look for? Which people would you keep? Which people would you add that you don't currently have on your team in order to fully become a stage 4 business?
I think that domain expertise becomes more important than ever, right? So when I say it, I think I got this from HubSpot's CEO, the U to the power of AI. It is an exponent to your ability. And one of the dangers of AI is if you don't if you aren't actually like say top 10% in domain expertise in the field, you don't really know if what the LLM is saying is true or accurate. And that can be a danger, right? And so for that reason, I think domain expertise actually becomes more important. Obviously, there are certain things that AI still doesn't do well. So I think taste and curation is still important. People generally care about other people, right? So like Stockfish has been beating grandmasters, the best people in chess for like over a decade, and people don't watch Stockfish play; they watch other people play. So anything involving like relationships with someone, that's still very, very human. And that includes things like business development and sales and all of that. I really don't see AI replacing salespeople for a while. And in terms of like what skills do people need, it depends on the role. So I think there is this concept of like an AI operator, right? And this concept of like someone who's more of a builder and more technological. That's going to become a really crucial role, and you're already starting to see people hiring for that role. But really, that's like 1 to 2 people in an organization. It's not a huge amount of people.
I'd go back to, as we were talking about stages 1, 2, and 3. Part of the transition there is, defining those roles with clarity, providing the team that exists with clarity around their standards. And I think you're right, Hayden. The domain expertise relative to a particular role or in a particular organization becomes more and more important with the use of AI as augmenting. And we've documented those roles now. We've got some meaningful standards in place. So let's go back and revisit those for a moment. Somewhere in that document, it's going to list the kinds of things that the person filling that role needs to be good at in order to be successful. It's like the schematic of success for that role includes, and then there's a list of skills or competencies. I think the thing that's changing is that we're going to insert row and say, AI literacy is going to become more or less table stakes, depending on the type of role and depending on the particular domain that role applies to. So it's like I see it already. It's like, okay, there's always going to be a list of top 5 skills or 8 skills or whatever for every single role. AI literacy at the appropriate level just got added to that list, and it might have bumped something else off of that list. We've I guess joked that if A players are what's required for an organization to thrive, the next level is it's going to require AI players. It's the AI team member that's going to really enable us to grow and thrive in this next phase.
Makes total sense. Yeah, what I'm noticing too is like part of every profession is going to be the knowledge of how to use AI in that profession. So like my brother-in-law is an aerospace engineer, and he was showing me all these really kind of funny examples or absurd examples of how they're trying to use AI to solve really complex engineering problems. And it was just making the most stupid or crazy or absurd mistakes. It just didn't know enough about aerospace engineering. But then, so that makes me think, okay, we're not going to just like substitute aerospace engineers with AI. Like, please, I don't want to fly on that airplane, right? But now, to what it's going to mean to be an aerospace engineer is to know in what context and in what situations can you use AI, which should you absolutely not? What is the boundary between those two domains? If you don't know that, you're going to be a pre-AI engineer, and thus just far less effective and far less productive.
Well, those spaces are the most ripe for opportunity, right? Because if the LLM itself doesn't innately know it, then there's an opportunity to fine-tune a model, right? That will then know it, and then that's your IP.
Interesting.
Right? And that will happen. 100% that will happen. And 100% those aerospace engineers that understand how to work with that will become more in demand.
Absolutely. So as we transition now to stage 5, the question that comes to mind is why go to stage 5? Like stage 4 sounds pretty leveraged and awesome. What is the thing that would happen, or the limitation or the ceiling you'd run up against that makes you think, no, we need to go to stage 5?
So again, I want to think of this in a little bit more nuanced way, right? Which is that not every part of your business will necessarily get to stage 5, or would you want to get to stage 5? And stage 5 right now, today, is somewhat theoretical, right? It does exist in certain formats, right? But it really exists primarily in sort of that like market to lead aspect, right? So I don't think you would necessarily want to do that. And in fact, I think only very, very, very simple business models will allow for it. And those business models will, not have the largest addressable market anyway. I do suspect there'll be a lot of, the equivalent of these sort of like spammy businesses, that used to exist.
What did you call it?
Like spammy businesses.
Spammy.
Like they don't really add much value, but they generate enough money because they just use massive automation, right? And so I think that's going to be an area that kind of stage 5 will probably represent. It'll be like the black hat. What you're normally going to see in the stage 5 business is things around marketing. So things around, like, let's say I mentioned before, like research, right? So research a list of my target market, right? Okay, now write a personalized email to that person and then send it. And then you build the infrastructure that actually allows it to send without a human's in the loop, right? And so you've probably noticed, I've definitely noticed, you've probably noticed a litany of more emails coming to you from people you don't know.
Oh my gosh, so many.
And that's because of this, right? So
And
this
they're getting
is
better and more personalized, which then takes more effort to figure
actually
out that they're...
Exactly. And in some cases, like they, by knowing who I'm connected with on LinkedIn, they'll say that, this person suggested that I get in touch with you, and they know stuff about me. And so now I've gotten quite good at, identifying this because I can architect it, right? But that's one area where it's already happening, right? And again, that's an area, if you wanted to, you can send hundreds of thousands of emails. And yes, today they might get, a 0.2% sort of connection rate with people. But hey, if you send 100,000 emails, that's a lot, and it doesn't cost you anything, right? You are going to start seeing that with calls, right? So specifically like with setting more than with sales. My kind of experiments in setting has shown that even though they are not as personable or have as high conversion as a human, the fact that you can connect with someone instantaneously when they have momentum and true desire and interest, like you can call them within 20 seconds of filling out an application, that makes all the difference. And that can be very expensive to do, with humans. So I think it'll happen in sales. It's for fulfillment, it can already happen with a lot of software solutions, right? And you don't even need AI for that, right? For customer service, it's certainly already happening with chatbots. Some level of exception handling, right? Need to talk to an operator, but again, that's probably under 5% of the time. So it's already happening in areas at a time. And so the key is to understand what areas actually could be fully automated. What I find, and we teach this in the cohort that I think is really interesting, is, and you actually just prompt the LLM, what is the AI first stage 5 version of my business? What does it look like, right? What's it priced at? Because I might have a product that I price 5 figures, and there's this AI first version that does 60% of what my product does, but can price it for free, right? Or can price it for $10, $10 a month, right? Understanding that, understanding what that looks like, because that's going to happen, right? The one interesting thing about, one of many interesting things about AI is that it democratizes everything, makes everything so simple to do that it's just going to create competition over everything.
Yeah.
Right? So software isn't dead, right? But now because everyone can access software, you're going to see the weirdest, little software, most niche software startups pop up because you don't need a massive addressable market to deal with it, because creating the software costs nothing. And contacting the customers costs nothing.
Yeah, we're seeing this. I'm starting to see little, people creating little video games around a single meme Like one meme happens, like the astronomer CEO thing that's been consuming the internet the past couple weeks. Someone made a video game based on that one meme that in 1 week is going to be, the news cycle is going to change. But for that week, they're going to rake it in, which you would never have seen before. Stuff like that.
It probably took them a day.
Yeah. Or like for us, we're now putting, we have lead magnets on this video, on all of our videos. We're putting similar effort, or not similar effort, but we're creating lead magnets and giving them away for free. Where in the past, we would have had to charge for that. Like we would have charged for the resource that we're creating. Now it's just free because we're selling something else.
Yeah, lead magnets, that's something we teach in the cohort, but like lead magnets now are so easy to do incredibly well that it's worth doing not only just for leads, right? It's worth doing as nurturing, as enabling for customers.
Yeah.
So as as this team works together and as these cohorts occur, something that's fascinating to me is to really present these things like lead magnets or concepts that we're learning is very much leading edge in the world that we live in, and to also own the fact that we are also still learning. So this really is a living laboratory, and so I think it's important to point that out and to acknowledge that even the lead magnets that exist associated with this video do a couple of things. One, they help us learn. And for those that choose to go through the process and do the assessment using, whichever form of that lead magnet we actually, link here in a moment, it's also an opportunity for them to learn. So that's something that's, I think, important to point out to, people that might be considering the cohort, is that, engaging with one of these lead magnets is actually a step in the process of you beginning to make these transitions yourself. They're actually, not only are they teaching you something about yourself as a result of an assessment or a score or some kind of insight, but they're actually getting you hands-on with how to use some of these tools to begin imagining how you might use these tools to affect this kind of change.
Yeah.
So it really is a living laboratory that truly is it's exciting to be able to generate and provide that kind of value today.
So I have here as a description of what this kind of business looks like. The business runs itself within your parameters. AI agents manage entire departments. Humans handle exceptions only. AI self-monitors and self-optimizes. Any of those that you want to speak to and kind of flesh out more?
It's probably easier to just give an example, right? So I'll just riff on this a little bit, but let's use education as an example, and even like cohort-based education. So you have a program, I have a program. What does the AI first version of that look like? That maybe could be almost like potentially like a weeks-long lead magnet if you wanted it to be, or it could cost very, very little, right? Well, you need customer acquisition, right? So we talked, maybe you do it outbound, maybe you do automatic, hey gen videos for YouTube, right? Maybe you just use massive amounts of content that you post to your site that you don't even review, and that brings people in. Sure, okay, you have lead magnets that lead to this, you have a payment gateway, all that's automatic. And now you set people up with a simple chatbot that's personalized, that records everything, that remembers everything. And that chatbot takes people through a curriculum on their own time, right? And that chatbot opens people up to a community on Circle or on Slack, right? And so you have this almost cohort nature, but you don't really have anyone facilitating anything there, right? Because it doesn't cost anything. And then you have things around, generating reviews and testimonials automatically happening with that same chatbot. It's one chatbot talking to you the whole time, right? You could look at any education instance, and the more niche, the better, right? You could talk about DJ schools. You could talk about, culinary, very, very, specific culinary stuff, right? And that entire business can operate with one person, right? And that person only handles the exceptions, right? And that person's probably a developer, right? And probably has like high development skills. And I believe we're just going to see more and more of this. And that's exciting to me because it is kind of a way to revolutionize education, because you actually can personalize that education to each person. So that's what that looks like, right? That AI, that stage 5 business. There are certain things it can't do still. And there are certain things that probably many people would be willing to pay 1,000 times more in order to get those things, right? To have real life connection with people or have real access to actual experts, right? Not just an agent, right? Just because they care about human connection, right? Or they care about that domain expertise.
Yeah.
But 100%, like these are the businesses of the future. These are the $100 million one-person companies, and maybe in some instances, $1 billion one-person companies. You operate in a large enough market and you take 1% market share. I listened to Kevin Kelly on a podcast a while back, and he talked about how he uses AI to basically create novels for himself, right? In this concept of like an audience of one. And so I started doing it, and it was super fun. I'm using ChatGPT, which has memories and knows everything about me. And I can say, hey, recreate this novel in the style of this person meets this person, right? And it just became abundantly clear that that is probably the future of media, right? As we get to the point of like TV, right? My interests, I'm an eclectic person. Like I like soccer, I like business, I like video games, I like chess, I like paddle, and I can, something can create a series involving all of those things. Or if I go through an education program, something can personalize education and give me all the metaphors and analogies in the way that I like it, right? Or gamify it in a way that really works for me, right? And this is that level of personalization and audience of one is, I think that's going to be the future.
And also service of one or product of one or experience of one, just hyper personalization across the economic landscape.
Yeah.
Huh. So bringing it back to the perspective of a business owner, I have a note here that at this stage, building moats becomes essential. First, I've started to realize that a lot of people don't know that term moat when used in business. So what is a moat, and why does that become so paramount?
A moat classically is this, body of water surrounding a medieval castle that keeps the enemies away, right? So it's hard to cross and keeps the unwanted intruders away. So in business, a moat is the activities or the capabilities that an organization has that are very difficult for a competitor to duplicate and to replicate. Usually they exist not as a single thing, but rather as a set of things taken together, any one of which that could be replicated, but taken together, no one in the competitive marketplace is willing to do all of those things. There are some classic examples we could get into, but that's what a moat is. It's like that thing that's hard to cross. Competitively, you can't easily come in and take the particular market share we're focused on because it doesn't make sense. It's too hard to do.
So a lot of the traditional moats pre-AI continue to exist, right? So network effects, right, obviously continues to exist. Brand is probably post-AI is going to become even stronger of a moat. There are some things that are IP-based that become less of a moat, right? So specifically, if I wanted to go and recreate all of the software it took to make a Monday.com or something, and I'm sure they spent tens of millions of dollars, that could be done in a matter of weeks or months with one programmer today because of AI. So a lot of that stuff disappears. Data, I think, becomes even more of a moat than it has before because data just allows you to do much more with AI, right? So that data it has an exponent now with AI. So yeah, I'd say network effects, brand, data are all huge. And then certain things like, software and, probably diminish.
Let's talk action steps. What do we do with this information?
So number one, identify what stage you're in, right? We have
Awareness.
And identify what stage you want to get to. So it may be that you are totally happy staying in stage 2 as a company, and maybe you don't want to scale to a massive company. That's totally fine, 100%. Like I said, I've spent the last decade buying stage 1 companies, getting them to stage 2, and stage 2 is a great place to be. Maybe there are elements you want to experiment in stage 3. Maybe you're like me and you're just curious and you want to go as far as you can. But number one, identify where you're at.
If you'd like to know which of these 5 stages your business or the different functions of your business are at right now, along with a completely customized roadmap for how to move from whatever stage you're at to the next one, check out this 100% free diagnostic tool that we've created just for you at this QR code or at the link in the description below.